Hi, this is Ed in San Diego, and this is Global TV Talk Show. It's a news service of globalbusinessnews.net. Our very special show today introduces Tokyo in Japan from a business culture and lifestyle perspective, and we have experts. The only experience I have in Japan is when a plane landed in that big airport. Never made it out of the airport. I was en route either to Seoul or Hong Kong. I'm not sure, but it was a long time ago. Would love to experience this and someday. So, also on the show here is John Schuldt in the blue shirt. John has lived and worked in Asia and in Tokyo, I believe, right?
Yep,
Uh,
that's
and
correct, Ed.
with Ford Motor Company and others. Is now an executive with a company that's one of our sponsors, International Auto Source. They'll tell you about that in just a sec. And Ben Wada uh, uh, is now in New York, originally from Japan, and also in the same company as senior representative Ben Wada and Catherine Gronauer. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, great. I was introduced to you from Rob Maisel. Rob Maisel is in Manhattan, and in the past he's worked at Bloomberg and also toured around the world and has been in Tokyo and Japan. And he was trying to teach me some basic Japanese the other day, and it just went right over my head. So I remember to bow a little bit, but
Perfect.
I've been looking at videos, and I want to go. It looks like just a beautiful place, clean and safe. So, Catherine, let's start with you. Thrive Tokyo sounds like a terrific program and service. Would you please briefly introduce yourself and about Thrive Tokyo?
Sure, I'd love to. Yes, so my name is Catherine Gronauer, and I am half Japanese, half American. So my mother is Japanese, and she's originally from Tokyo, and my father is American. And I grew up living in Palm Beach, Florida, and also Tokyo, going back and forth throughout my life. I started Thrive Tokyo several years ago to help foreigners in Japan learn how to live and work here. And I actually originally started my business as a health coach, but I found that a lot of people didn't even know how to do grocery shopping, much less get healthy with all the foods that they could find in the grocery store. So it started off doing orientation programs, and that led into doing cross-cultural training at corporations. So I really like to help professionals learn how to live here, and also their spouses and families as well. And help people build their routine and learn how to live in Japan on their own terms. So whatever lifestyle they would expect to have lived outside of Japan, trying to help them get onto the same page within Japan.
Okay, so when you work in your role at Thrive Tokyo, is it with expats? Are they mostly spouses? Or are they corporate?
It's a combination. So I primarily do cross-cultural training for corporations. So a lot of those people are expats. And also I do get inquiries from people who are spouses as well, who want to learn how to live and do their day-to-day living here in Japan. So I do a little mix of both.
Gee, that's great. Rob, how did you meet Catherine?
So we connected on LinkedIn, actually through an article that I had read that she wrote for the Worldwide ERC's Mobility magazine. Reached out, thought it was fantastic. Started chatting, figured out we had a lot in common. We do similar things, and I said, "Hey, let's connect," and we did. And then they said, "Hey, let's connect with Ed," and we did.
Oh, that's great. Okay, now I want to go to John Schuldt and Ben Wada. Briefly, John, tell us about your role and IAS.
So, International Auto Source is a 25-year-old company. It's a division of a 50-year-old company. And what we do is we help expatriates either moving to the United States or moving to another country to be able to get a new vehicle. And when you don't have a credit history, your credit history doesn't transfer from country to country. So if you relocate to another country, you need to be able to have a vehicle, and you can walk into a dealership and try and buy a vehicle, but a dealer is going to look at you and say, you have no credit history, you have no identification number, you can pay cash. And we offer a financing solution that provides better cash management for those assignees that are moving to the US or anywhere around the world. And we offer both a short-term option, which is 12 months or less, and then the longer-term option for a traditional expatriate assignment that would be 2 to 3 years.
Great. Ben Wada, tell us about
Yep.
you and your experience.
Okay. I'm originally from Tokyo, Japan, and I came here after graduate school in Japan. And I currently work in international outsource for the Japanese marketing. So, that's my previous job was in the financial industry for 27 years. I was doing for the investor relation communicator. Actually, I was communicating with company and investors between the US and Japan. So I was organizing the meetings and also the consulting how to marketing their own company to share to the investor in the US. And also I tried to promoting the investor to the Japanese corporate, which type of investor is going to be supported for the corporate or not. So I was involved in that coordination for longest time. And since I joined, IAS is in particularly focusing in the Japanese market. We try to grow in our company. So that's what I'm doing now.
Briefly, Rob, tell us about the book you're writing. It's almost done, huh?
Yeah. So Ed, this book is basically showing people. I just felt like I had such amazing experiences traveling around the world and the benefits that I received, and just felt like I had to share it with people. And so, yeah, it's in the first round of non-Rob editing. I will say, because I went through it. I went through it first myself. Sent it off. Super excited about it, and wanted to take one quick moment to tell you that I also keep a gratitude journal. So every day I write down something that I'm thankful for. And today, Ed, you were the star of the show, and I'm grateful for you. And I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that all the hard work that you do and putting this show together on such a consistent basis, getting such high quality guests, programs, and the consistency in which you do it. It's what you do with your team is quite remarkable. So I'm appreciative of that.
Well, you know what? When I get type A personalities on the show, it makes my life easier. Then I don't have to talk so much.
There you go.
So, Rob, what's the book title?
It's actually still undecided, if you can believe that or not.
Well, that could be a good title.
Yeah, that sounds good, right?
So when were you living in Japan?
So it was back, the years were 2012 through 2015.
Oh, wow. So did you live right in the center? I don't know anything about Tokyo, but I know it's a huge place.
Right in the heart of it. And, so for those who are familiar, I was in Shinjuku Ward. I was actually in Yotsuya. So really, really, to me, found like it felt like a very central location because it had like the JR rail and then the Tokyo Metro system too, like interconnecting points from each of those systems were right there.
So why were you there?
So initially, I went during a long, extended backpacking trip after doing my MBA. I sort of said, I'm not taking the traditional MBA route. I want to see Asia. I've never done this. So I did. Made a couple stops. And when I got to Japan, there was something drastically different, unique, special, fun, strange, exciting, every adjective under the book, really. And I just wanted to learn more. So I ended up basically making a few connections and was invited back. So after the trip, I was actually invited back for a position to work there, to live and work there.
So you learn the language and the culture, of course.
Correct. Went there knowing nothing, left still with a lot to know and learn, but knowing a whole lot more than I did before I got there.
So let's jump over to John now. So you have vast experience in the automobile business and a lot of it in Asia, right?
That's right. I was able, and I echo what Rob said. I was fortunate enough to live in Tokyo twice, 1996 to 1999 and 2001 to 2004. And our youngest daughter was born in Tokyo, which was quite an experience for a foreigner to go through. We lived in the first time in a place called Chuoku, which is right on Sumida River, which is not normally where foreigners would live, but we did not need education for our children at that age. They were much younger. So we lived in an area that was really the original center part of Tokyo. We came back in 2001. Children were older. We needed to have access to school buses and transportation to get the kids to school. So we lived in Shibuya-ku. I'll just echo what Rob said. He was there on a cultural experience. I was there on a business experience, and every adjective that he used applies to business as well as culture when it comes to the challenges and the excitement and the fulfillment when you are able to finish a deal or finish a business deal in Japan. It's very gratifying. And one thing, I know we're not supposed to make speeches, Ed, but I do want to engage Catherine a bit, because what she does is so important. And if we can talk about how when an expat goes to Japan, there's one, as part of a family, there's one person that's doing the work and the family is left behind in a different culture. And what Catherine does is so important to make sure that the trailing spouse is feeling happy and safe and comfortable in this new environment. That's really an important piece for foreigners who are thinking of moving and to Japan to live and to work.
Catherine.
Yeah, so
Yes.
I guess just, the first things that come to my mind for that is, most expats who come here to Japan, they already have a certain level of support from their company. So they already have a purpose for being in Japan. So they have a day-to-day routine with their work that's already set up for them. They already have, access to meeting people throughout their company. And, you can go to lunches and to dinners with your colleagues and learn how to make friends there. So we have this thing called the expat life cycle. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's basically the emotional ups and downs that people will go through when they're living in a new culture. And, we call the first phase the honeymoon phase. So anybody who comes to a new culture, usually you're kind of in that mode where you feel like you're on vacation and you're learning everything for the first time. You're going to all the nice restaurants and, everything just seems really fun. But then there comes a point where you realize that you're living here and you have to build your day-to-day routine. Maybe you want to start cooking in your kitchen instead of dining out every day, but you realize you don't know how to shop. You don't know how to use your kitchen, appliances, and there's just a huge learning curve. So meanwhile, the spouse who comes to Japan or whatever country that they're going to, they don't have a purpose for being here other than just trailing along. And they're usually more focused, especially if you have kids, on trying to build your day-to-day routine. And there just isn't really any support for that. They have to go out of their way to find and meet other people and create their own networks. So you basically have, within the couple, one person might be in the honeymoon period for 3 to 6 months, at work because everything seems great and they're being very well taken care of. And then you have the trailing spouse who might go through the honeymoon period for just 2 weeks. And then after that, it's just kind of the reality hits of trying to establish that routine. So even within the marriage, there could be a lot of, ups and downs with each person trying to go through their own cultural transition and, emotions.
So tell me, what percentage, guess, what percentage of the assignees fail and need to leave?
You know what? I can't even do a ballpark number because I really don't know what that would be. But, I think of the situations I've heard that have failed, it's usually because the spouse is unhappy. So, for example, a company might invest in getting a 4-bedroom apartment for the entire family for an expat. And then, within a year, the spouse decides to go back home and then take the children with them too. And so now you're paying for like this apartment and you have somebody on a several year contract, but, half of their family and all the other investments that they made to support the family have kind of gone out the window when they leave. So I would say, yeah, I think in most cases, the ones that tend to fail are usually because the spouse doesn't feel supported in some way.
So, to what extent is it in your culture and your business practice? And if I'm going out of line here, just tell me to stop, okay? But to what extent do you interfere? Not to, but inject yourself into that situation and try to help. Is that cool, or is that frowned on?
You mean in Japan? So if a
Yeah.
foreigner was here and they were just acting how they wanted to act, at what point do you tell them?
Yeah, like you want to take them by the neck and say, "Hey, shape up! You're costing a lot of money." But of course, that doesn't happen, does it?
Um, I think one of the main challenges is that most Japanese people, I would say, are aware to a certain extent that they're bringing in someone who's from a different cultural background. But I think from both sides, they don't really realize what problems they're going to face together until they actually happen. And sometimes they don't know, okay, is this issue I'm having like with miscommunication, is this just this person, or is it a cultural thing that's going to happen with every person?
Yeah.
So, if I'm Japanese and I'm in a company and an American comes along, it's like, okay, is this American guy the person who's acting this way, or is it all Americans act this way and we actually need to sit down and have a conversation about how things are different? So I really think that just there's a limitation from both ends on, on one level, they understand that people have different ways of doing business, but I just think they don't really understand how many layers there are that are involved.
John, I'm sure you could echo that.
Yes, there are many layers involved in business negotiations in Japan. And I'll just, as an expat who has done this, having a stable home life helps you to focus on the business at hand and helps you to not be distracted, knowing that your home life is in good shape. So things about the cultural training that's provided by people like Catherine and others that do this is so important. And I just want to say there were times that some expats kind of dismiss that cultural training as not important. And yet by the time when they get to the country, they realize, boy, I should have listened. I should have been more engaged in this cultural training because this is different. And it works both ways. Ben will tell you it works that way when the Japanese come to the United States, just as when Americans or foreigners go to Japan.
Yeah, Ben?
This little thing is different in Japan, Japanese culture in here in the States. Many people misunderstanding is in simple things you can do in here, but sometimes offensive to the Japanese people. So not necessarily you don't realize that kind of little different, culture things that makes you sometimes you embarrass yourself in among your society.
We're looking for sponsors all the time to be able to do these shows worldwide and to present increasingly strong quality and good people. So, Paul, would you please begin the program? What you're going to see is a variety, and then we'll come back on the other side and we'll talk about the use of video in acquainting people with Japan and Tokyo and other things.
As an expat moving to the USA, relocating is exciting, but it can also be stressful. Getting a car, truck, or SUV for personal transportation is usually a high priority. That's where International Auto Source comes in. We make getting the vehicle you want for your work assignment or academic program easy, so you're ready to drive when you arrive. Our product specialists have helped over 50,000 expatriates with their personal transportation needs, making us the largest international auto retailer in the world. International Auto Source gives you flexible payment options to buy, lease, or rent a vehicle from the world's leading auto brands, arrange financing on a purchase or lease without a U.S. credit history, social security number, or driving record, get full insurance coverage, and get approved easily through our low-rate factory-backed financing programs. And because we're an authorized distributor of the world's leading automotive brands, our no-haggle prices are competitive, and the buying experience is hassle-free. We'll even guarantee your new vehicle will be ready the day you arrive. With over 20 years of experience in the global community, we are the vehicle experts for expats. We are International Auto Source.
Hello there! Are you going global? If so, it makes sense to obtain insurance that will cover you and your family members globally. Expat Financial is an independent international brokerage that offers international health insurance, expatriate life and disability insurance, as well as travel insurance plans to both individual expatriates and expatriate employers. Expat Financial connects clients around the world with well-known and respected insurance service providers while providing excellent client support and service. Individual expats can also obtain a quote and apply for international health insurance coverage via expatfinancial.com. Expat Financial, a division of TFG Global Insurance Solutions Ltd, can also source special risk coverage for employees working in high-risk countries. Please contact Expat Financial today to discuss your global insurance needs. Remember, Expat Financial is your go-to expatriate insurance specialist. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
So, John, tell us about the car business and how you ran it when you were based in Asia.
How much time do I have, Ed?
Well, we've got all night.
Well, the automobile business, while it's global in nature, in terms of sales and marketing, it is very local. It's a very different purchase process in the United States versus Japan versus South Korea versus Germany. In Japan, there's much more of a personal touch. The salesperson will go to the customer's home, do the negotiations with the customer in their home. The dealerships do, because land is so scarce in Tokyo, dealerships and in Japan in general, the dealerships do not have large physical footprints to be able to stock a lot of vehicles. So the salesperson might bring what we call a demonstrator vehicle, a demo. The customer will drive it. If they decide to purchase it, then the salesman delivers the vehicle to the customer's home. And one thing that as a foreigner, I always found interesting was the way the vehicle is delivered in Japan. So as Americans, we like to have our vehicles completely detailed and prepped and ready to go. In Japan, it's the same thing from an external standpoint, but internally, the plastic will remain on the seats and on the steering wheel and on the shift lever, so that it gives comfort to the purchaser that no one else has had this vehicle or been in this vehicle. And people will purchase the vehicle and then drive with the plastic for several months on the seats. And that was always a very interesting dynamic of the car business in Japan.
So that sort of reminds me, I grew up in the furniture business, and in some homes, people actually keep the plastic on their sofa.
Right, right, or on the lampshade, right? On the lampshade.
Wow. So, Catherine, from a cultural point of view, what do you think of that? And I mean, it's a combination of cultures. It's really marked. It's really a strong, visible. I should say, visual that defines that Japan has a very distinct cultures, and how hard is it to acclimate for an American? How hard is it to acclimate people into Japan? Well, they just never do. They just stay by themselves or in ghettos or what?
I mean, I would say it's probably hard for anybody who has global experience. So that includes Japanese people who have global experience, who have lived abroad. So I think the only people it's really kind of easy to meld into the culture are just Japanese people who have really never been abroad or don't speak English, because there's only one way that they know how to do things. But I think what is so tough is that Japan is really different on kind of every single possible cultural dimension scale that we could talk about. So for example, communication, they use indirect forms of communication as opposed to direct forms. So they might not say yes and no. It could just, they can communicate with you indirectly. They can use sounds. They could use, body language to kind of communicate with people. So that's something from a visual perspective, that's something people have to learn. Also business practices like meeting styles are very different here. How people think about performance and performance expectations is very different. And I think that's something that is probably the most, I wouldn't say shocking, but kind of the most surprising for most foreigners who come here, because, in most global companies, we're very focused on targets and fulfilling certain targets that we have within our work. But, there might be other things that people value in Japan, like, coming to company related events and showing loyalty to your team and staying late to help other people. Those are things that are kind of equally weighted. So I feel like in just kind of every category of work, there's just a different way of thinking. And I find that it doesn't matter if you're American or not, if you've worked in an international environment, the international kind of setting is just very different from a Japanese setting.
John, is that your experience?
Oh, certainly what Catherine is saying about performance metrics it's very different. The ability to show empathy and to be part of a greater society than just yourself is important. And hence you have the nightly dinners, the nightly engagements with your team. And that's the time, it's always very interesting to do that. That's the time when, if you're having a few beers or reishu or sake, the formality breaks down and people can say what they actually want to say to you. And then the next day you go back in the office and it's back to the hierarchical way of doing business. And anything that was said the night before is not brought up, and it is, well, it's not forgotten, it's not brought up in the context of the day-to-day business. That's a very important part of the Japanese business culture, the bonding after work. Just a real quick story. I was a bucho. I was a general manager for a company that Ford owned called Mazda, and I ran our Tokyo office, and I had the entire northern third of Japan that I was responsible for. I'd been on the road for a week with one of my employees and an interpreter. We were traveling back to Tokyo on the Shinkansen, and it was a Friday. And I said, to my employee, why don't you, he lived about an hour outside of Tokyo. And we were going right by the station. I said, why don't you get off here? He said, oh, no, Johnson, I need to go back to the office. I need to work. And I said, no, I really want you to go home. We've had a long week, and you should go home and spend time with your family. And over the course of a few minutes, I finally had to pull rank. And I said, look, I'm the Bucho. I'm telling you, you're going to get off the train and you're going to go home. So he went home, and I went home, and I had a nice weekend, and I'm thinking this was great. So I came into the office. I got into the office on Monday morning about 7:30, and he was there already, which means he left his home at maybe 5 or 5:30 a.m. to take the train in. So in our back and forth and my poor Japanese and his poor English, we talked, and I said, well, how was Friday night with your family? And he said, it was very nice, but I can never do it again. And I said, why? And he said, because when I walked in the door, my wife thought I'd been fired because I was home early. And I disrupted the entire evening at home with her preparing dinner for the children, and I'm not normally there. So I can never do that again. And I that was a tremendous learning experience for me. And that led to a greater understanding of the dynamic of getting together after work, and the way that builds the team and builds camaraderie. And your work teammates, in essence, become your family at times.
So let me ask you a question about that work practice of night socializing, and then the next day hierarchical. So it does. You're not able to display friendship in the office because of the structure. But,
no, you can display friendship, but there is I guess maybe a code, if that might be too strong a word, but there's a way of doing business within the office. And if you are the Bucho or the Fukuhan Bucho, and you say, this is what we're going to do, everybody says, yes, sir, and that's what we're going to do. Whereas they may have a feeling that it's not the right thing to do, but they're never going to question you in the office environment. When you go outside after work and go to dinner and have some beer, and you're just sitting around and talking, and maybe you're having, you're smoking, or izakaya, right? And you're having some cigarettes and smoking and drinking and just talking, and that's when they'll let you know their true feeling. It's, Rob, I'm sure, has experienced tatemai and honne. I very rarely saw honne. Honne is loosely translated as your soul. Tatemai is what we see as foreigners when we go to Japan. I saw tatemai all the time. I very rarely saw honne, and when I saw it and realized what I was experiencing, I paid very close attention to that, because that's something that many foreigners, certainly if you're going there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're not going to experience that. But if you go there for a 2 to 3 year assignment and you're lucky, you are going to experience and engage in a what I call a honne type of conversation.
Ben, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, good. From a honne point of view here now, are you enjoying this experience on your phone?
I'm sorry, because since it's stone nearby my house has a cell phone tower was going to knock me down too. So that's why both electric power and the cell phone was also now.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm sorry you're having this trouble. So, John, I want to tell you that I had bought a Mazda Millennia in 01, a new car, and I drove it until about a year ago. And from all that time, I had about 150 or 160,000 on it. And, the engine is, the engines are great.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else fell apart, but the engines kept going. Finally, I just gave up. But but it was a wonderful car. You know, in the end, it was like a clunker around town because it was heavy.
Right.
But at that time, it was like a forerunner of the Lexus, or an example of it, especially the Millennia.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it had all the bells and whistles on it. It was a great car.
Yeah, Mazda makes wonderful automobiles. They do.
Yeah.
No, I hope you don't mind I interject, but
No.
John reminded me of something my aunt said I thought was funny. So, you know, John talking about how, you know, his subordinate had gone home and it disrupted the family life, et cetera, et cetera. I heard a story from my grandma that apparently when my aunt was about 8 years old, she asked her, you know, who is this guy who keeps coming here every night and eating our food? Like why does he, like, this guy just keeps coming in and eating our food, and I only see him at night. And she's like, that's your father. Yeah, so a lot of children growing up too just don't, at least in previous generations, things might be changing a bit now.
Yeah.
But at least my parents' generations just grew up not really, seeing their father at home. They'd usually come home pretty close to midnight or after the kids have already gone to bed, and then they leave in the morning before the kids wake up or before everybody starts doing their morning routine. So yeah, that was a fun memory that came to mind.
So, in terms of expats of all kinds in Japan today, is it mostly Americans, or is there a potpourri of everybody?
There's a huge mix. I'm really bad with statistics, as you can tell, so I don't really know the numbers, but I actually think the majority of foreigners that are in Japan are from Asia. So places like China, Philippines, Korea, Vietnam. I would say they make up a huge part of the foreign community in Japan. And then, of course, you also have Westerners as well. And within that, you have people from the US, but also from Europe and other countries. So I think usually when we think of foreigners in Japan, we're usually thinking of people who are not Asian, because Asians just blend in with everybody. But there's actually lots of foreigners walking around within Japan that people might not notice are foreigners straight off the bat. But I would say that a huge part of the population is probably from Asia.
And what's going on now with the COVID? Are you guys impacted?
Well, I would say, yes and no. Our numbers have slowly been increasing, but they're just not really at a stage that it's really that bad. Everybody's been wearing masks, but I would say people are kind of back to their pretty much a normal routine. But the thing it's affected the most is travel bans. So there's a lot of people who have visas and even permanent resident status who are stuck outside of Japan, and they've been stuck since March. So it's been several months that they haven't been able to get back into the country, and that's caused a lot of controversy, because it's one thing to ban people coming from other countries in general to stop the spread of COVID, but it's another thing to ban people who have permanent resident status, who have been living here for like decades, and Japan is their home. So that's kind of been, I would say, the biggest controversy that's come from COVID thus far.
Yeah, let's pray for salvation here. Rob, so when's your next trip back to Japan?
Ooh, I'm not sure, but I was actually there on this last world trip that I was fortunate enough to complete before COVID hit. Japan was my final stop, and it was sort of a reminiscent. It was an important stop in the journey because it was just reminiscent of my time there, living and working and just exploring. And so December of last year was there. The next time I go, I'm not sure, but I'm excited to go back.
Yeah, that's cool. So Catherine, thank you very much for doing this. I welcome you to come back. I also welcome you. I invite you to write an article, and I'll publish it in our magazine, online magazine. John, I hope you found this useful. Ben,
yeah, it's very interesting. I'd like to. I mean, if there's a way where you could send us the information of Catherine and Rob, I'd like to connect with both of them on LinkedIn. And,
yeah, same here, John.
Yeah, Japan for me, I went there for the first time in 1996, and then went again in 2001, and it was just an amazing experience. And I can sense, I mean, from Rob, I see you.
You see my head nodding like this.
Yeah. I would love if if an opportunity came up and somebody said, "Hey, John, we need you to move to Tokyo, and we want you to do a 2 to 3 year assignment." I would go in a heartbeat. It's a wonderful country. It's a country. If you're to go there just for 2 weeks on a vacation, you'll see some beautiful things. You'll eat some beautiful food. You'll see wonderful countryside. And you had said you don't know how many people are roughly in Tokyo, but so between Tokyo and Yokohama is about 35 miles roughly. And within that space, there's 35 million people.
Oof.
So you'll see tremendous crowds. But then if you go an hour outside of Tokyo to, say, a place called Hakone, which is a beautiful resort area with beautiful mountains and trees, and it'll be like being in the American West in the Rockies. It'll be just fresh air and beautiful trees. So you get such a diversity of not only of geography, but of just a sense of, I can go an hour outside of here, and I'm outside of where 35 million people live, and I can be in almost a completely different country.
And where will the Olympics be held when they hold them?
I would say probably Tokyo. Maybe Rob or Catherine might know. I'm not sure.
It's actually the stadium is kind of close to where both of you have lived. It's in the Harajuku area.
Harajuku.
Yeah, so in Harajuku, actually, it's kind of right in between, I would say, 5 different stations, but Harajuku is one of the closer ones. Harajuku,
right.
Dainomiya, Omotesando, that kind of area. But I heard that there's also different locations where they're holding sports. So some are in Yokohama area, some are kind of closer to the bay. So I think they're going to be in multiple locations, but the main stadium is in the Harajuku area. Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to say thank you. I'm really honored to be able to have this opportunity to do this program, and I thank IIS for co-sponsoring. Rob, thank you again first of all, for your kind words, but for just being a pal. And Ben, it's really good to have you. We'll do this again, and when the power goes on, everybody's in full power.
Yeah, the hurricane was pretty tough to go through here in the New York area.
So, John, just to sum up now, because you're the sponsor here, tell us about that commercial. What's your feedback on that commercial?
Well, when we developed that, we wanted to get across the fact that we understand the issues that expats face when they move to a completely different culture. And when people are moving, they don't necessarily think about a vehicle. And so we've done some research, and when people are just getting ready and starting the process of moving, purchasing a new vehicle is somewhere around 50th on a list of 100 things that they need to get organized. You're going to look for your house, schooling for the kids, that kind of thing. Specifically to the U.S., when people come to the United States, within a month, it moves from 50 up to number 2. Because unless you live where Rob is in Manhattan or New York City area, or Chicago or Boston, you're going to need a vehicle in the United States because the public transportation infrastructure just isn't here. And so we tried to craft that message to show our potential customers that we understand what's happening when you're moving to a country, and we're here to help. And we provide the service, we provide the financing option, which helps you to better manage your cash flow when you're moving to a new country. And we can do it all online, over the phone. You never have to set foot in a dealership. You don't have to interact with people. We'll take care of getting your title, your registration. We can help with insurance. If you need driving lessons, we can help you with driving lessons. So literally, the day you arrive in country, you can pick up your vehicle and experience the freedom that owning a vehicle or driving a vehicle gives you. When you can go somewhere on your own schedule when you want to go and not rely on public transportation to get you somewhere. And that's what we were trying to get across in that video.
So what about training in driving in Japan? And so isn't it so that the driver's wheel is on the other side, or?
Well, it's on the right side, and for Japanese, it's on the, for an American, it's on the other side. But I, for 12 months, your American license will be valid. So you get an international driver's license, you attach your American license to it, and you can drive. The bigger challenge is navigating the streets and not being able to read the signs. I can't tell you the number of times I turned at an intersection and was going down the wrong way on a one-way street because I couldn't read the signs telling me I was turning onto a one-way street.
So does Waze translate into English?
When I was there, maybe Rob or Catherine can say, when I was there, that kind of technology didn't exist. We used paper maps.
Yeah, I didn't have access to that technology when I was there either. And I just want to say, John, there's such value to the service that you provide, because people get to a country, they don't realize maybe right away that they need this vehicle, especially if they're outside of a big city. Then they're like, I need it. And they don't have the means to get it, right? They don't have the credit history. They don't have the know-how. And so the service that you provide is really phenomenal.
Thank you. We're very proud of what we're able to offer and we've done it for 25 years. We've got 50,000 customers around the world, and we're very proud and grateful for our customers, and very proud of what we're able to offer.
Catherine, in summary, are you hired by the corporations? Is that correct? As well as you reach out individually?
Yes, exactly. So I get hired by corporations, or I have individuals who just reach out to me, and then we come up with something together.
Okay, good. So do I have your permission to give out your LinkedIn page to the 17,000 connections I have? No.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I've enjoyed this show, and thank you for being our guest. As you could tell, we try to have fun in an educational context. So again, thank you. John Schuldt, Ben Water with International Auto Source, Catherine Gronauer from Thrive Tokyo, and Rob Maisel, author of Undecided.
Hey Rob, can I request an autographed copy of Undecided when it's finished?
Absolutely. I won't even tell you that decision's undecided. That decision is decided.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much for making our show. This is Ed in San Diego, Global TV. Sayonara.